Welcome to Pasa, HSIs, a podcast dedicated to everything Hispanic serving institutions. I'm your host, Dr. Gina Ann Garcia, bringing you the news on what's happening in HSIs. Join us as we explore the history and evolution of HSIs, culturally relevant and liberatory practices, current and emerging research with HSIs, and the policies that shape servingness.
Saludos, HSI familia, and welcome to Season 5 of Que Pasa HSIs. We are excited about a new season and kicking it off with our first guests, Amparo Medina and Desiree Ortiz. Amparo Medina currently serves as a student activity specialist at Oxnard College, where she guides and mentors students through their leadership development and advocacy efforts in the college-wide decision-making process. Amparo is also heavily involved in Classified Senate, where she completed 6 years as a Classified Senate president. She has successfully advocated for tri-chairs at both the college levels and the district level, as well as changes to the program review process pertaining to classified. She currently serves as the president-elect for the California Community College Classified Senate, or 4CS, and is a Colegas board member where she represents the interests of classified professionals. Her unwavering commitment to the students and dedication to her coworkers as Classified Senate president earned her Oxnard College's 2022 Classified Employee of the Year. Amparo is currently working on her doctorate in educational leadership at CSU Fresno and has an MS in educational counseling from the University of Laverne and a BA in American Studies from UC Berkeley. Amparo is joined by Desiree Ortiz, who is a Chicana Mexican-American native to Orange County and educator with 19 years of experience in higher education, primarily within the California community college system. For the past year, she has worked at Irvine Valley College Police Department as the senior administrative assistant, and prior to this role, she was in financial aid. A proud puentista and product of community college, she is dedicated to student services and a champion for diversity, equity, and inclusion, positively impacting students and the college campus. Through her multiple leadership roles, she intends to make a positive impact in higher education. This includes being past Classified Senate president, tri-chair of the Classified Guided Pathways Completion Team, and the First Generation Club Advisor. She also fosters DEI by participating in shared governance, such as the College Council, Chancellor's Council, and the District Resource Allocation Council. I'm excited to welcome these poderistas to the microphone. Amparo and Desiree, thank you for joining us today on Que Pasa HSIs, where we talk about all things HSIs. Let's start by learning about you both. Please tell us about your servingness journey, and we'll go ahead and we'll start with you, Amparo.
Thank you. Thank you for having us on here. It's such an honor and a privilege to be here with you. I think for me, looking at my servingness journey, I really identified in 3 different components. My journey as a student, I came up in high school during the days of Prop 187, learning about advocacy during that time, right? That was a huge time, being involved with organizing walkouts. And that was my first introduction to advocacy work when I was in high school. And then I had the honor to, and I feel privileged to go straight to UC Berkeley, which was also during the time of Prop 209. So I was there for both of those and, trying to figure that out. And my time at UC Berkeley really helped to shape who I was as a Chicana, as a student. I grew up with pretty much the same 1 to 2 Latinas, Chicanas in my classes all through high school, elementary school. And that really changed for me in college with Chicana studies and ethnic studies. And so that is where I found social movements and political movements and who I wanted to be, right? But a couple other parts of my journey are in that time, I also became a single parent, which has really driven me as far as the support I want to provide to students, right? I have 3 boys. I am raising 3 boys while they're now all out of high school, but education is not for them right now, right? And that's fine. And at some point, they're going to figure out where they want to go. And I hope that somebody will show up for them in the way that I show up for my students, right? And that's really what drives me. And then a third part of that, and I'll be honest, and I was like contemplating, do I go, do I mention this or not? But I really feel that it has a lot to play in how I view servingness. I am part of a 12-step recovery community. So being in recovery and supporting my friends and those who want to go back to school, right? Trying to just give them advice and guidance that really drives me. So being a mom, like I said, being a student and being in recovery, that really plays a critical role in my servingness and wanting to give back. I'm not a first gen student, right? And I used to feel like I separated myself a lot from other students because I'm like, well, I don't have that experience. Both of my parents went to college, they have degrees, but I have other experiences that even though they're not unique, right? But they're also experiences that people don't necessarily come out in the open and talk about. And so I want to get rid of those barriers, and I want to break down those walls. And so my students, I'm very open with my students. They know they can come and talk to me about anything. I'm like, honey, if you've been through this, I've probably been through worse, right? Or I'm not ever going to judge you. You know, whatever it is that you've been through, I'm here to support you. And that's, to me, what serving this is about, right? How do I help you get to where you want to be in your life? And right now I work at Oxnard College. UC Berkeley, as you know, working there is not yet an HSI. You're on your way there. UC, you know, with Oxnard College, we've been an HSI for a very long time. But the idea of HSI work honestly did not come into my consciousness, like the understanding of it, until I heard you speak at the Colegas conference. And that was changing for me, right? And we really have been doing a lot of work here at Oxnard College to identify who we are in the servingness journey, because we are one of those colleges that it's location based, right? We have a high percentage of Chicano-Latino students because of where we're situated, right? But does that mean that our work is intentionally geared towards them? No, not necessarily, right? And so how do we change that? What is it that we need to do to, you know, help support our students, support the various needs of our students in a very intentional way? So I'm still learning. I have a lot to learn. I love your books. I love learning from you. And so that's where I'm at in my servingness journey.
Appreciate you. Thank you for sharing such deep and personal information with us as well. And it's a part of your journey. So I'd love to hear it. Desiree, let's bring you in. What about you? Let's hear about your servingness journey.
Thank you so much. First of all, what an honor to be in space with such wonderful Chicana women. Thank you so much. And Alan, of course. I, like Amparo, have a servingness journey also that could fall into 3 pillars. I am like 4th generation here. My great-great-grandparents were from Mexico. So I learned at a young age from a strong mother to use that voice and to show up in spaces where others necessarily couldn't. And I think that goes a lot from what my grandmother, a lot of the women in my family faced. So I was always taught by my mother, you show up, you use your voice. So from that at a young age, even now, she always says, you know what, you don't let anybody put you down, but you don't put anybody down. You come with that servingness, that respect. So I'm always mindful of that. Second, my journey as a student. I went to fashion school right out of high school. That was my first love. And I learned the hard way back, you know, in the 90s. Fashion for women of color or people of color was not existent. I found myself going through this journey in the spaces that I was in, constantly having to show up, use my voice, but not only for myself, for multiple people. And it did just really get exhausting because I found myself hitting a wall all the time thinking, okay, maybe this isn't for me. I decided to make a transition and went back to a community college, actually OCC, shout out to Orange Coast College. I was 28 years old and I discovered the Puente program. And being an older reentry student, I learned servingness, not, I think, because others seen it in me at that point. I was terrified. I will never forget the first day of class, but I sat right in front. And my professor at the time, Professor Gaitan, who is still at OCC, shout out to him, in charge of Puente, tapped me on the shoulder, and he seen in me what I didn't see in myself, to be the mentor for the rest of the class. And I took on that role. I was the oldest in the class, But there were times when we had students, some of my classmates who wanted to drop out of school. And he said, "Can you please talk to them?" And I'd share, you know what? I'm an older student. I'm 28. I've done my first journey of what it means to be out in the workforce. Without this degree, you can't help your family. You can't help yourself. And so being that role model to them was that servingness that I never even knew I needed and I wanted until it happened. And my third journey was becoming a mother myself, as Amparo stated. Um, my first daughter was born with this not only a severe health problem, but a learning disability. And throughout her whole educational career, I had to show up and remind people as educators, you are not going to fail my daughter because I'm not going to fail her, and you will not fail her also. It has been a journey. I have to say, going through the public school system as advocating for your own child. And, just my last name alone, people would ask me, educators supposedly, "Do you speak English?" And that alone would it would throw me like, are you kidding me right now? And so advocating, I got to the point that I was advocating for other parents that they would not bring in an interpreter for them. They were making decisions for their children on their behalf without even giving them that option. So I swore as an educator, I would never do that to any student. And I like to tell people I landed in higher ed. It chose me. I didn't choose it only because I decided to apply at Irvine Valley College. It's the only college I've worked at for the past 19 years. Um, I was in the banking industry actually, and I took a job as a customer service manager, and I applied for the position that I started out here at IVC. And I took it, one, because my older daughter, I have two girls, was born with heart disease. And so she was in and out of the hospital for her first year of life, which I had to advocate for her there also because they would come in and say, "Mom, do you know English?" I, always that advocacy piece of showing up once again for those who couldn't show up for themselves. And so I took the job here at IVC, and it took me 15 years, I think, new administration, our amazing leadership, Dr. John Hernandez, you know him,
Yes, I do.
to instill that leadership and that advocacy piece in all of us, to allow us that space to show up for our students. And so, that's where my journey began. And here we are. And, learning that piece to even serve with each other. Because
Mhm.
Amparo and I have met a few times, but every time we reconnect, it's like we were meant to be in each other's spaces. So,
Oh, I love that. Oh, thank you for bringing motherhood in. Both of you brought motherhood
yes.
in. I love that as part of the serving this journey. People often talk about their own mothers or grandparents and whatnot, but to talk about our own children, I love that. So thank you. Thank you for these beautiful journeys. And y'all keep talking about advocacy, which is what we're going to spend a lot of time talking about today, particularly as y'all advocate for classified professionals through Senate, right? But let's first talk about what does that term mean? So Amparo, I'm going to ask you, just so that we all are on the same page, for listeners that don't use that term on their campus, what does the term classified professionals mean, particularly in the California community college system?
Sure. So classified professionals refer to non-faculty, non-counselors. So everybody you see in the financial aid office, in our maintenance and operations, our custodians, we have our administrative assistants who, I believe are the backbone of our colleges. They, are all knowing. My position, for example, I'm a student activity specialist, so I support our student government. So that's another facet of governance, right? So basically anybody who's not in the classroom, our instructional lab technicians, they're considered classified professionals. Admissions and records, we're all over the place within the community college system, supporting the services of students outside of the classroom.
Thank you. So a lot of people on campus, basically.
Yes.
There's a large group on campus, it sounds like. All right, so let's hear about, so both of you have served as classified Senate president on your campus. So I want to hear about what that role entails and some of the work that y'all did. So let's talk Desiree first. Tell us a little bit about your time. Is it like a 3-year term, it sounds like?
Thank you. Yeah. So most terms is actually 2 years, but if you're president-elect, it's 2 years of getting to shadow the current president, and then you serve in your role. And actually, when I became Senate president, my dear friend here on campus, shout out to her, Angela Roscoe McKinney. She was going to be the actual president and decided she didn't want to do it. She just couldn't. She took on a new role. And so it just wasn't timing for her. And so they asked me if I wanted to take on the role. And my first initial thought was absolutely not. And I think Amparo and I spoke about this of why us women of color really don't want to fall into these volunteer roles, what it really means to take these on, to show up, and to represent. But with some twisting of the arm, I took on the role. And when I stepped into the space, it was really to shed that light and to represent and to lead alongside my amazing classified professional colleagues here on campus. I'm a firm believer that most of the times a student comes on campus, the first person they come in touch with is a classified professional. And because we take on these roles, as Amparo stated, we're all across campus. It's our facility maintenance. It's our financial aid. It's myself now that I took on a new role. I was in financial aid for 16 years, and now I'm in our campus police, and we actually are a full-fledged police department. And so it's taking on these roles and using our sphere of influence where we're at to play that piece and that role for our servingness for our students. What is it that we're seeing our students go through that we can make a difference and help them with that piece of staying in their classes on campus, because we know that connected piece of having students be a part of campus. And so I believe when we take on these roles, I know I didn't do it alone. I did it with the help of my classified colleagues. And my intention was to really shed light on what it was our students were facing. I came into presidency right when we were coming out of COVID. So it just lended another lens of what that meant. One of the things that I wanted to be intentional about was how we were going to make that difference and lend that servingness piece. So when I got into my presidency role, the one thing that was very important for me was to align our Senate roles with our academic Senate. Our academic Senate has a VP of equity, they call it. And so I decided to add that role. I brought along my colleague, dear friend, who is now the director of research at Cabrillo College, Dr. Marcela Reyes, and she was our VP of equity for Senate, but she lent that voice to our diversity, our equity, our gaps, and what we're not doing to service our students. And she sat on our tri-chair. We have it's called our PAC DEIA, President's Executive Council, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Access. And she was our classified role for that. And so from there, it led to um, other committees. We developed the first all classified professionals guided pathways committee, which I know in other colleges, they're now starting to bring that work on, where we, along with our faculty, we formed a committee and we did that framework together. And one other thing that I was really intentional about is making sure that collaboration with our academic senate was there. I was very fortunate. The academic senate president at the time made me a standing agenda item on all of his academic senate meetings. And that is huge. The fact that, you know, they invited classified professionals to work alongside them was huge. And another part, we're part of a 2-college district, our sister college, Saddleback College. We decided that it was time we needed to really collaborate across district and bring our classified colleagues along. So in fact, tomorrow we will be joining together our senates to create a collaboration of a retreat to come together and just talk about our goals as a district of pretty much servingness. What can we do to service our students better?
Yes, awesome. Thank you. Oh, this is so helpful. For somebody who I haven't thought much about, right? Like classified professionals' role in servingness, which we're going to get to deeper. Just hearing, right, the dimension, all the dimensions that y'all take on, right, within Senate. Amparo, you want to talk to us about your presidency and some of the advocacy work you did through your role?
Sure. So I'll be honest, when I first joined Classified Senate, I had no idea what I was getting myself into, especially when I took on the presidency role. I joined as a Classified Senate secretary. I want to say in my first couple of years here, and you know, and I have to preface this by saying, you know, a lot of this work would not be possible if you don't have the support in place, right? I'm very fortunate that I was hired by Dr. Oscar Cobian, and he has been first my VP, and then he was our interim president for a little while. And he has really supported all of the initiatives and the efforts that Classified Senate has taken, and my connection to Classified Senate and the work that I do. So I just want to give him a quick shout out because, you know, it's critical, right? I speak to other colleagues across the state who don't have that support in place, and it makes it really hard for them to move forward and for their advocacy efforts. So with our Classified Senate, at the time back in 2017, the Classified Senate president at the time got a position at our district. And so it was a interim position, so they just needed somebody to step in, and nobody else on my board wanted to at the time. And so I was like, I'll do it, because I love learning how things work, right? I love learning about different departments. I'm like, okay, this will give me an opportunity. And to be honest, I approached this position as I was going to be scheduling luncheons once a month for, you know, potlucks for our classified to come to, and occasionally bring in a VP to just go over, you know, some initiative that we are doing, because that's kind of what we were doing. That's what I had watched, right? And then and even when I became Classified Senate president, so we, you know, and I'm sure this is the same across the board, but we have an opportunity to provide our input at the Board of Trustees meeting, right? And so we have a seat there, and I didn't attend. I was in the middle of my master's program. I had class the night that we had our Board of Trustees meetings, and nobody else really wanted to attend, and I didn't push for us to make sure. So I think we went probably a year or two without having a voice at the meeting. And then I finished my program and I started attending the Board of Trustees meetings, and I was like, whoa, like this is powerful. Like I have an opportunity to represent the voice of classified and be vocal about our needs, right? As a Classified Senate. So I'd say over the years, I was in the role for 6 years. It started again as the interim, and then I became permanent. So I had, you know, 2 back-to-back terms plus when I first started, and it really evolved. it could honestly be a full-time position, the amount of work that we do. I think at one time I counted, I was on 26 committees, just representing the needs of classified professionals everywhere from accreditation to facilities and planning to budget. We have a college planning council. And so one of the things that our district, our sister college, Ventura College, I am part of a 3-college district, they developed a classified 9+1. So for those in the community college system, we know the academic senate faculty have what's called the 10+1, and these are basically their rights that they have to be consulted on collegially before a college makes a decision, right? That's going to something that's going to affect them. And I will say, being a student advisor, I also know that the students have a 9+1 ed code, right? Where colleges have to make sure the students have every opportunity to participate, right? And provide their input. Classified have nothing other than it saying classified have the right to participate effectively, right? It doesn't have anything written out the way the student and the faculty do. So Ventura College created a classified 9+1, Oxnard College and our district ended up adopting it. And I'm really proud that 4CS, which is the California Community College Classified Senate, has adopted it at a statewide level. So we now have a 9+1, which I hope one day will be an ed code, but it's a start, right? So we were able to push that and get that going. I think as far as classified Senate, we did a revamp of our participatory governance manual. I was able to successfully, along with my colleagues, change it from being position appointed representation to constituency based. Right. So instead of it's, oh, you're going to be in here because you have this position, it's okay, academic senate, you have, 5 seats, classified senate, you're going to have 3 seats or whatever the case may be. And we also moved it to a tri-chair process, like Desiree was mentioning. So we also, 5 of our 7 committees are now tri-chair to include a classified representative representing classified senate. For us, classified senate, we have a seat on every final presidential hiring. We were able to change our resource request process. So when I first came into the role, we would receive so as program review, right? Departments go through program review and they put in their resource requests. And that included personnel, including classified. So they would put in the different positions that they would needed, and we would put them together in a list, and then the different lists go to various areas. So like, for example, academic senate would review faculty. The classified were not involved in that review process, but on the classified side, it was classified and we had management and we had faculty. And I was like, well, wait a minute. If faculty don't have to have classified in there, like, why can't we as classified be empowered to review that process on our own? And so we were able to successfully change that. And so now with the resource request process, classified senate receives all the classified resource requests that come through, and we rank them. And then that recommendation is given to our president, who then makes decisions based on our recommendations so that we're taken into account. Classified are now involved in accreditation. And, I really think that we have evolved classified senate and empowered classified to realize the power of their voice, right? When I first came in, it can be scary, right? Going onto a committee and you have faculty and you have administration, and it doesn't matter that the classified sitting next to me, that she has an MBA, she sees faculty, and there's that power dynamic and the hierarchy that we, has been in place for so long, and it's changing that culture, right? And it's empowering classified and saying, you have just as much information to provide in this committee as anybody else, right? When we talk about the needs of our students, I firmly believe, well, faculty are going to hear certain aspects, when students self-disclose through assignments and whatnot. When you're a financial aid officer, or you're working through basic needs and you're having to hear day in and day out and work with the students consistently about what they're going through, what their needs are, that gives you a different perspective, right? That gives you a different understanding. And those students are making, they're making connections with you to where they're going to be the person you come to when they're struggling with something, right? And so I really believe that classified play an important aspect in that role. And so for our, classified senate, I'm really proud of all the work that we have done here at Oxnard College. I really think we've made changes just in the way, again, classified are looked at. We have our president's executive council, a classified senate president is a part of that. So weekly they meet, and when I was on there during my term, every week I met with all 3 VPs, the deans, and the president, and any decision making that was coming up or any issues like, hey, this is what we have going on. Amparo, how are classified going to feel? And I can take it back, right to the classified senate. So we've done a lot of great work. And I think that there is power in classified. And one thing I do want to say, just to separate out, there is a difference between unions and classified senate. And I think that is an important part to say, because there is a power struggle. I'll be very honest, between classified at times, because there's not, they look at it as power versus I look at it as I'm here to support the needs of our students, right? And it's in different capacities. The union, yes, they're very powerful, and they're there to support the needs of, hiring and health and safety, right? That is very different than professional development. That is very different than the technology, right? It's very different than the day-to-day operations that classified senate can have, a voice on. And as classified senate, we are very vocal in saying it. We have it written out in our documents that we're there to discuss issues that come up outside of the collective bargaining agreement. And I think that's very important to understand, because we do recognize the importance of the unions, and it's not about us trying to blur that line, because it's not at all. Unions have their purview, and then classified senate has purview outside of the union. So I think that is an important aspect that I wanted to make sure to touch upon.
Thank you for that. I really needed that, because I know when we first started talking about this episode, I kept kind of blurring those lines, right? And you were like, no, it's classified senate, right? Like you're like, that's what I can talk about, right? So thank you for that. That was a good, right, distinction. I'm learning a lot, y'all. So thank you for breaking this all down. But for me, it sounds like y'all are really talking about classified. Your role in Senate is like advocating for classified to make sure y'all have equitable. So there's equity, right? Because like you said, Amparo, there is those hierarchies, right? And on college campuses and university campuses, that hierarchy is administration, faculty are at the top of the hierarchy, and then classified sort of are like, not always seen as like equal, right? And so it sounds like y'all are your voices to say we are absolutely equal. And as you mentioned, Desiree, we're the ones that see students first. The students are going to come to us first. When the students are crying, it's y'all, right? Students crying, needing help. That who's here to support them, right? Whose shoulder are they crying on, right? And so thank you all for that, right? And for bringing this important conversation in. You both mentioned a tri-chair model. I want to make sure we talk about that, because that's a newer term for me. I hadn't always heard it until I really started working with the California community college system. So Desiree, tell us like specifically, what does the tri-chair model mean?
Thank you so much. And that is a really good question. I think when Amparo was sharing what it means to have a classified senate, what it means to be president, she touched on something really important, that without the support of our leaders, we wouldn't even be able to be and have a seat and have that tri-chair model. When President Hernandez first came to IBC, he wasn't at a college that even had a Senate. And so that was all new to him. And, being at IBC for 19 years now, in the past, I will say our leadership was not all about having a tri-tier model, not all about having classified, have a seat at the table. And so with new leadership, bringing that servingness lens from our president to our chancellor, Dr. Barnes. People know her. She brings that servingness, that care, that supports what it means to be a tri-chair and to initiate that. And for us here at IBC, I will say when President Hernandez first came aboard, he is the one that embraced more of the tri-chair. The first tri-chair model I heard of is when he formed our President's Executive Council, our on DIA. And the tri-chair is a faculty representative, a classified professional, and an administrator. And they are the chairs of these committees, making sure, first of all, it's very intentional. It's intentional because every voice, every person at the table brings their voice from their lens of administrator, a classified professional, and faculty member to bring that servingness piece to whatever committee and whatever practices and goals for what it is we're trying to achieve. Tri-chair models, I will say, work when you foster that sense of collaboration on your campus. Um, we are at a really good time here at IBC that we are able to do that. We work closely, as I stated before, our faculty, our administration. So it works when you're able to bring that piece on. We just recently formed, and I'm pretty sure you heard of um, what it means to be in Caring Campus. So here on our campus, it was all classified led. What were our responsibilities of making sure when a student comes on campus, they feel that sense of not only connectedness, but they feel cared for. And so what we call that culture of care, that ethos of care. And so one of the things that we decided to do was create this tri-chair model. Let's bring in now the faculty, let's bring in the administration and classified to see what work we are going to be doing, not only in the classroom, outside of the classroom, but as a whole on the administration level. What is all of our parts in making all of our decisions to each committee that we have? And as you know, we bring different voices, we bring our different experience, we bring different aspects of what we believe is change. And one of the things we're always mindful of is to make sure we have that student voice also. The only reason why we don't make them an actual chair is because we know they're very busy and we don't want to put that pressure on them, but we always make sure that they're a part of it. It's great practice. I encourage any campus, if they are able to execute it with the sense of collaboration, and as I said, intentionality, bring that servingness lens of what it means to all come together and make these decisions. I have to say, it's a beautiful thing to watch when you're all in the room, when you're all at the table together, just ending the one goal of wanting to see students succeed. That it's a beautiful thing, but it has to be intentional and you have to have the support of your leaders.
Mhm. Thank you for that. I was just recently working on putting together a committee, and we were talking about co-chairs, and I actually used the term tri-chair that I've learned from working with y'all, right? I had not heard that term until I really started working with the California community colleges, but you just described it in a way that, again, that equity and like power of chairing, these different committees. So I'm learning with y'all right alongside. Hope listeners are too, taking notes of like, what does this look like, right? To really create equity in decision making, particularly when it comes to HSI efforts. Because we do see power imbalances in the HSI efforts as well, which is going to leads me to my next question, right? For Amparo, as you know, classified professionals are not in the servingness framework, nowhere in the servingness framework, and hasn't even come up in my own HSI research, right? Some would even argue that servingness tends to focus primarily on faculty, we spend a lot of time on faculty and or administrators and not bringing classified in. Even in season 4, episode 4, Carla Silva talked about her dissertation research that focused on managerial staff and said that those participants, her participants, said they didn't feel like they were part of HSI work, right? Despite the fact that they were likely doing HSI work, but they didn't feel like they were part of the campus HSI, movement. And I've seen that play out, multiple times. So let's talk about that. Amparo, what are your thoughts on how can we be more intentional in this HSI work to ensure that we are bringing classified, professionals into the conversations, and that we are engaging classified professionals in these conversations about transforming the campus?
Thank you. And I think that's an excellent question. When you look at the California Community College system, who most closely resembles and mirrors our students? It's our classified, right? So when we're talking about servingness and our experiences, classified professionals need to be a part of the conversation. They say an institution's budget will show where their priorities are, right? And so for us, for example, at Oxnard College, yes, so Flex Day is a great example of that, right? Professional development is a great example of that. Classified can be supported when institutions invest in their own classified and the work that the classified are doing. So for example, we here at Oxnard College, we have separate funding set aside specifically for classified professionals, right? So that way we can go about and do our own professional development, go to conferences, do our own learning. We also have set aside funding specific to college-wide professional development. And then now we actually just identified a new funding for DEI funding, right? So it's really investing in the culture of our campus, in the DEI work, in the servingness framework, making sure that classified, their voices are included. I don't know, we have developed an HSI task force, and classified are included. So whenever I think when an institution creates any new committee, whether, again, anything that we do is connected to students. It's all about supporting students, whether it's budget, whether it's facilities, there's a servingness that goes along with it because it's all about supporting students, right? And so having classified involved in that conversation, it doesn't just limit it to the faculty in the classroom experience, right? You bring in the classified experience. And again, as Desiree mentioned, classified are the ones that most likely students are going to see the first time when they first walk on a campus. I don't know how many, I've heard stories, for example, we had one where a student was struggling. They didn't, they weren't really sure what to do. They're coming to campus to try to learn. And it was actually our campus police who happened to walk by, our lieutenant, saw a student just sitting there and said, hey, can I help you? Or do you need to go certain, where are you looking for? And that made a difference between that student leaving and staying. Right. And that student went on to get enrolled in classes. And so I really think that, classified have a specific role that they can support in the servingness journey. I think they're part of the framework. When you talk about the various areas that we cover, it's all part of servingness, right? When you talk about basic needs, right? When you're making sure that our students are fed, when you're making sure that students have housing, right? We have, I know we are actually looking at creating a position that supports our students who are unhoused right now. And that's a population at every community college campus. So I really think that leadership at colleges, when they're creating these committees, when they're creating communities, they're looking at equity efforts and servingness, it's not just about faculty. Classified have just as much to say and need to be involved in that conversation. And they need to be invested in. Like I said, let us learn professional development. I was able to attend the Colegas conference. I was able to attend the ASI conference because our administration believed in the power of investing. Our state chancellor's office, they do funding, but in my time here, I believe there's been one time where we received funding that was specific to classified. And it was actually funneled through the union versus through classified senate, right? So a lot of times the money comes for faculty because there's a lot of work that faculty can work on, but I think classified have just as much. So administration need to find that funding within their own general fund or wherever that needs to be to invest in classified. Self-assigned or flex day, I keep calling self-assigned flex day, but there's self-assigned flex day, there's mandatory flex day. That's only mandatory for faculty, right? It's usually the classified who are holding it down, who are having to stay in the office, especially when you're at a small campus, who are there trying to figure things out while it's the faculty going in and getting professional development. So We here at Oxnard, for example, we'll find other days. What are days that we can bring in people such as yourself, right? And our administrational support shutting down the offices, even if it's for half a day. Yes, we believe that this is critical in your professional development. And I think that's what it's all about, right? Giving classified the time and space to go and learn. Because if their supervisor's like, no, I need you to run the office or I need you to be here, there's no growth in that, right? It's a mindset, and it is a mindset. It is a total culture shift because not all colleges are used to that. They're used to, like, okay, we need to make sure to keep the office running because it is about students first. But if the classified aren't growing, we're not supporting the growth of our students at the same time.
Yes, exactly. 100%. The flex days, and for listeners who are not in the community college system, the flex days are those professional development opportunities, right? So at any campus that's having those professional development opportunities, if HSI is part of those professional development, which it often is, as you mentioned, I'm often invited into those spaces to help with professional development. But we're not bringing all partners from campus, all constituents from campus, then only one piece is getting one piece of the campus is getting a learning, which is often faculty.
Yes.
And like you said, classified stays back and holds it down, right? And is like, we'll keep the campus running, right? While y'all go learn, right? Go take your time to learn. So thank you for that, because I think we need to have these conversations, because I have heard from staff that say we're not even invited to the talk that you give, right? Because we have to stay back and hold it down, right? Yet the professional development is so important, particularly when it comes to HSI and servingness, because this is a new concept to most of us, right? That's why the conversation is so robust right now, is because HSI is a fairly new concept to most of us. We're trying to figure this out. So we all need that development. So I'm going to throw it back to Desiree with this one. I co-authored an article about faculty governance sometimes hindering HSI servingness. And what we talked about in that article was that faculty sometimes could create like new ideas, innovative ideas for better serving students, let's say in the classroom, right? Creating new curriculum. And then they have to pass it through their academic senate or their faculty senate. And those academic senates are not on board, right, with the work, and they shut it down. Right? They're like, no, we don't need that curriculum, right? No, we don't need DEI. We don't need bilingual courses, right? For Spanish speaking students, right? For whatever reason, shutting it down. So I wanted to hear about like the classified professional staff aside, right? If there are folks on campus who are sort of building the HSI movement and trying to get some support, what would be some suggestions for gaining support from a senate, right? If they have a classified professional senate on their campus, what's the best way of gaining support from y'all if they're not already in the classified senate structure?
Thank you so much. That is a great question. I think one of the things that you touched on earlier in Amparo is, that professional development piece, particularly, for example, Flex Week, where classified aren't, showing up or maybe not allowed. When you feel like you belong in the space that you're able to attend, that they're speaking to you, of course, you want to show up, you want to be a part of it. And one of the things I think what we've done here at our campus, and it kind of just happened, I want to say, when the guided pathways structures came out, it was geared towards faculty 100%. And I happened to sit on one of the first teams that we call here, um, on behalf of my assistant dean at the time when I worked in financial aid. And he asked me to be a part of it from the financial aid lens, from that piece. And the constant conversation that kept coming up for me was, wait a minute, why is there not a classified on each one of these teams? Why is there not a classified helping with each one of, the enrollment piece, the onboarding piece, what if they need a parking permit, whatever the case may be, why is there not a classified? And so, in these spaces, I spoke with the Guided Pathways chair and said, we need to create a classified team, an all classified led, so we can bring our piece of what it means to bring that servingness, how we can help our students bring that that practitioner, that social justice piece, as you stated. So one of the things they said, absolutely, would you be willing to chair? I said, absolutely. So what we did to bring people on board to that is we decided we are going to concentrate. What are we going to concentrate? What does our research show? And so one of our researchers who was on our team said, you know, our statistics keep coming back to our first gen students. What are we not doing for them? What is it that we are missing the piece on? And I said, well, as classified, what can we do? And so the first thing that we felt that we can do, hit the ground running, is celebrating National First Gen, you know, College Day on November, I believe it's November 8th. We had never done it here at IVC. Our sister college Saddleback had, but we'd never. So we said, you know what? Let's take this. Let's run with it. And we got support. As Amparo stated, we received funding to run our Senate. And so we asked for additional funding to put on this celebration day. And now it's a day that we celebrate every November. It's been, this year will be our 4th year. And we're seeing more and more classified wanting to show up for that, to put themselves out there, one, to say, I'm proud to be first gen, to help students recognize that, you know, we are here to support, be proud that you are the first. We created, I have my Zoom screen. It was something that classified were proud of, lending that caring piece also, helping our students who identify as first gen. And honestly, every year we have a Senate retreat. And each year, that's the one thing that comes up that classified are like, how can I get involved? How can we make this day better? How can we celebrate more our students? And how can we give them the resources we need?
Thank you. Y'all are just making me over here thinking, like, I hope listeners are thinking, either if you have a Senate on your campus for classified or staff Senate, right? Or however they call it on your campus, to get involved, because y'all clearly have a lot of advocacy and power, right? In those places. So get involved. It'll help advance, right, some of the servingness work. But if you don't, then there's advocacy for having these Senate spaces, right? Because I don't know that all colleges and universities have classified senates, right? But it's pretty common to have faculty senates, right? Again, that idea that only certain voices are important enough to make decisions on college campuses. So I'm loving this conversation, bringing this really to light, right? And making sure we're having this conversation, particularly in HSIs, because like Amparo noted, a lot of times the classified staff are like mirror. That's the one population on campus that almost, I've seen some data on a couple different campuses that are nearly mirror the student population, right? So if you got 50% Latina students, like nearly 50% of your classified staff are also Latina. So that's the population that is going to be doing the surveys, and actually students see themselves, right, within, whereas we know they are not seeing themselves in the classroom because faculty data show that they're still haven't caught up, right, to the students. One more thing I wanted to make sure we talked about, Amparo, I'll give you the opportunity to talk about 4CS, the California Community Colleges Classified Senate. So tell us about that work that you're doing, because that's like the next level, right, of this work. So talk to us about that.
Yes, so I'm actually the president-elect. This year I'm the president-elect for the California Community College Classified Senate. It's a mouthful. And I'm really proud to be a part of that organization. The organization itself has been around for, I want to say 30 plus years. I really feel though that it's in its infancy. You know, your own research has showed the reality is, right, governance is still very white dominated. That applies to all senates. You know, I'm not going to say one or the other. I think that applies to classified senate as well. And so when we look at like the equity and social justice, I think we're barely starting on that route. I think for a long time, 4CS, we are not an ed code, and that really has been like the goal, right? And so sometimes when you have one goal in mind, it can make it difficult to look at other areas or other facets of areas that we can concentrate on. So I think that we have made some strides. As president-elect, I have a seat now on the CCLC board. I have been a part of the CCLC Advisory Committee on Legislation, the League Advisory Committee on Legislation. We have a seat on the State Chancellor's DEI committee, right? So we have seats on various committees throughout the state that are allowing us to insert our voice into the decision making and bring in equity and social justice, right? And kind of move away from, we know we want to get an ed code, but there's other avenues to go about it. And I think we're having that realization now. I'm excited to see what we can do in the next few years when it comes to social justice and equity work. This at our last Classified Leadership Institute, we did have Dr. Keith Curry come and present. We've had Dr. Bull come and present, right? So it's moving it out of, and I hope people don't get mad when I say this, but that white dominated idea of what governance was, right? And looking for classified professionals to come in and understand that their voice matters, their experience matters, right? Look around at your room, Senates, look around at your room. Who are the ones, because this is about decision making, right? And so if you're saying, oh, well, maybe I don't have anything to add, and it's, other individuals adding and it's not people of color, there's a problem there, right? Because the perspectives and the viewpoints are all not being representative, especially when we talk about mirroring the needs of our students, and understanding the needs of our students. So for CS, I think we've been around, like I said, 30 plus years. We are making strides now. The State Chancellor's Office has taken note. We have been fighting for a seat on Consultation Council. And that goes back to that whole discussion between Classified Senate and the union, right? And so it's trying to navigate through that the best we can. But in the meantime, what is the work that we can do, right? What is the work? And so, you have your workbook, and I was like looking through your workbook again earlier today. And I really think there's a lot of ideas in there that can be brought onto Classified Senate, right? And so I'm even thinking like maybe we have a retreat, we have you come and present, right? And look at Classified Senate so that we can take this work back to our campuses and have that understanding of the power of our voice. I think being in the room when the decisions, I always think of Hamilton, being in the room when the decisions are being made is powerful. And that's how we represent the needs of our students, by making sure we as women of color, as Latine, that we're in there, right? That we are making sure that student perspective, that student voice, we're representing it, because everybody has a different perspective. And if we stay quiet, we're silencing the students that we're representing, right? We're silencing other classified individuals that we're representing, and we need to find power in that. We need to empower one another. So yeah, I think 4CS has done a lot of good work and will continue to do a lot of great work. The equity work, I believe, is just starting. So I'm excited to see where we go with that.
Woo, that was a good one. I'm glad you brought in the idea of like Senate spaces, which are governance spaces, which I talk about in Transforming HSIs, and the workbook, right, are often white spaces. Even when your classified staff are more people of color, right, and or mirroring your students, those spaces of power tend to stay, right, like more white dominant, right? And so disrupting those spaces, and y'all are disrupting those spaces clearly, right? We got Latinas in power in these classified Senate spaces, which is awesome. We need more of that. But yeah, the workbook, you mentioned the workbook. In the workbook, there is a page where we have you like think about like who is in the Senate spaces, in the faculty academic spaces, the classified Senate, and your student, right? Because that replicates itself in the student senates as well. We see that as well, right? And like Amparo, you said you work with those students, right? And that voice is important. All these governance spaces are where decisions are made. So thank you both for coming on and really elevating the voice of classified professionals and making sure that we really think about how we are being equitable in our decision making when we're thinking about who gets to be in HSI spaces, and making sure that classified professionals are there. So we're coming up at the end of time. Final question. You both got to answer the question. Nobody gets out of the podcast without answering the question. So I'll bring Desiree in to answer the final question on the podcast. Final question is, ¿Qué pasa, HSIs?
¿Qué pasa? Great question to end the podcast. A couple of thoughts came to mind. At IBC, we're still not quite an HSI. However, we frame that work of servingness as we were, that intentionality. And one of the piece that I like to remind anyone in any space that they're in, we all can bring that servingness component to whatever position we're in. Um, as I stated earlier in the podcast, I recently took a position here in campus police. I was in student services for the past 18 years. I came here because the group of men and women here come with that servingness mindset. They serve with an open heart, and seeing the leaders across campus, from our chancellor, Dr. Barnes, to our president, Dr. Hernandez, our VPSS, Dr. McDonald, where they bring this servingness. And it's easy for all of us to bring that servingness if we see others serving with us. So remember, always be mindful and intentional in everything that we do and every aspect that we're serving with whoever we're serving, and how we treat each other. I always like to tell people, as Amparo said earlier, we can't do this work without each other, without being kind and mindful that we are all in this space and work together. Um, I will say you touched on something earlier. In my whole 19 years of higher ed, we're a great time right now to see so many amazing Latinas in these leadership roles across the state. Um, OCC's president, Dr. Angelica Suarez, women of color, Dr. Olivos there in Fullerton. I mean, it's amazing to see across our state what is happening. I was super honored and privileged to be asked by my colleague here, Amparo, to be a part of this. And I think that shows our next generation of Latina leaders and, us helping each other, elevating us all in this work. And it's a great time. So, ¿qué pasa, HSIs?
That's what's up. Amparo, you got the question. ¿Qué pasa, HSIs?
¿Qué pasa, HSIs? I'd love to say classified professionals, own your voice, own your power, own your knowledge, own your experiences. We have something to say, and we should not quiet ourselves. And our leadership, my ask to our leadership is empower our classified professionals to get involved. Sometimes it takes that one-on-one conversation. We know that, like, when you're in a room full of people, right? We have a lot of introverts. I can be an introvert at times, right? But it's when you take that time to go to somebody and say, hey, like, I've noticed that you have the experience in this, or you've mentioned this. I really see you contributing, in this certain arena or on this committee, and that'll make a change. Because sometimes it takes, as Desiree pointed out earlier, it takes somebody else to point it out, because we don't always see it in ourselves, right? Because we a lot of times are our biggest obstacles. But I'm here to tell you that classified students, just empower yourselves, right? Your voices matter. We can't make changes in our system, right? The whole HSI work would not be occurring per se if Dr. Garcia had not opened her mouth and said, hey, let's take a look at this, right? And so I think that's powerful, and we have to open our mouths in order for things to change. So ¿qué pasa, HSIs? Like, keep doing the work, keep opening your mouth, keep, holding on to the strength that we have in unity, in our experiences. I think that's really important.
Yes, and that's what's up. Thanks, y'all, for joining me today on ¿Qué pasa, HSIs?